As folks start to jump in, I'm happy to get started with a few updates from 1% for the Planet. Hi, everyone. My name is Bailey, and I'm our Senior Community Engagement Manager at 1% for the Planet. Happy to kick off this really exciting virtual event featuring a conversation between CEO of 1% for the Planet, Kate Williams, and Annie Nyborg from Peak Design. Before we dive into the main conversation, I wanted to share a few new resources that we encourage you to check out. I'm going to give a few updates and then drop some links in the chat so you can access those if you're interested in learning more about anything. So first up, our 2025 annual report is now available. It gets into all the ways that the network made incredible progress for the planet last year. And despite it being a challenging year in many ways, our members gave more in 2025 than in any other year in our history, which says a lot about the commitment of this community for sure. So feel free to check out that full report for more details. Also, if your company sells or markets to consumers in the EU, no matter where you're headquartered, be sure you're up to date on all of our EU compliance resources. There's an important regulatory deadline coming up on September 27th when the ECGT directive goes into effect. And we've done all the heavy lifting for you to make sure that you're prepared for the shift and it's as easy and smooth as possible. We'll send some links over for you to get started for that as well. We also have a new peer networking program up and running for 1% for the Planet members. It's called the Changemaker Network, and just a few months in, we're already hearing incredible feedback from members who participate. It's open to all employees at member companies, so please feel free to share the link with your whole team. It's a great way to share knowledge, swap notes, build connections, and continue these conversations across the network. And then we're also deep in planning for our 2027 events, which also happens to be our 25th anniversary next year. So we want your feedback on where we should show up. So feel free to vote in the poll. That's going to be sent in the chat. And then lastly, just a housekeeping reminder, this is a webinar style event, so please remain muted for the call, but do feel free to chime into the chat, use emoji reactions. We will have staff monitoring the chat to answer any questions you may have. All right, that's it from me. I will pass it off to Kate.
Thank you, Bailey. Hello, everyone. So great to have you all joining us on this summer day here in Vermont. It is peak summer. My garden is in full bloom, more colorful than my backdrop, but my backdrop feels like a close approximation. I just picked a big bouquet, which is on the table in front of me, which makes me very happy. And that feels like such a great time to be having this call with you because really, just the kind of abundance of the 1% for the Planet community is something that we're really feeling right now. As Bailey mentioned, you know, such incredible giving statistics and just such strong community engagement. And one of the groups that I want to start out by celebrating is our sustainers. So these are individuals who choose to give directly to 1% for the Planet in the form of monthly recurring donations. And this is incredible fuel for us to do the work of building this global ecosystem. And we're doing a little campaign right now. So for anyone who is with us here, or if you are talking with someone who's like, well, I don't have a business, I can't get involved as a member, but I would love to support that amazing community. This is a great way to help grow the movement and to help us continue to do our work to keep, growing that giving going to environmental solutions. So this month, July, if we hit 50 donors, we'll unlock an additional 10,000 in additional funding from a generous donor to us. So if you're interested in this, you can head to our website and there's lots of information there about how to sign up. But now let's zoom out from that great focus this month. We are midway through 2026. I don't know about you, but while I'm very happy that my garden is blooming, I'm also a little bit in shock that it's already July. I kind of feel like didn't like 2026 kind of just start in some ways, but we're very pleased to be here at this midway point with you. And what stands out to me about this year at 1% for the Planet is that it's a really forward-looking year for us. We're always focusing on the fundamentals. Any of you who have recently been through certification with our team know that we're always right there in the moment with you on that. But we are also really looking ahead at the horizon of our 25th anniversary next year. which is really exciting milestone. And serendipitously, we will also be hitting $1 billion US in certified impact during that 25th year. So we love that. And we're deep in planning for how we're gonna both celebrate all of these milestones while also, continuing that look ahead. So we made it to this point in 20-25 years. What's next? How do we accelerate? So we are working hard right now just to kind of give you a status update on what some of those look ahead items are. We're hard at work setting up our movement to be globally compliant and really continuing to hold that high standard for corporate philanthropy for decades to come. Every year, as you know, those of you who have been involved, we've been adapting and building the movement, and we just continue to do that. And the way we do that is through feedback from you. So I do want to just really thank all of you for being always a part of who we are and who we are becoming. And a few things just as we look forward, we also look back to the amazing members who have been with us for 5 years, maybe 10 years. I was just in touch with a member last week who's been with us for 22 years, Patagonia, who's been with us from the get-go, 25 years, Surf Class, member number 1. So we wouldn't be here without you, and I don't want to overemphasize the members who have been with us for a long time. As much as we love them, the new members who are joining are bringing new perspectives, new energy, new industries, and that's all part of the beauty of 1%, is that we continue to be this diverse, growing network. And so with all of that, we're really excited and poised to meet the moment as leaders with you again, and really looking forward to the opportunities we'll have to co-create the thriving future together. And so with that, both the kind of looking back and looking ahead, we have a great conversation in store today. So I'd love to get to that. And I'm really pleased to introduce one of our really strong leaders in the network who's celebrating 10 years as a member. So I'd like to introduce Annie Nyborg. Annie is the head of environmental and social impact for member company Peak Design. This is a San Francisco-based product design company. I'm sure amongst the almost 100 people in the room right now, at least a good few of you have some beautiful Peak Design products in your remit. She oversees the company's environmental and social initiatives, including supply chain standards, government affairs, 1% for the Planet Giving, and decarbonization. She also currently serves on the boards of the Conservation Alliance, the Change Climate Project, and the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, which is on her home turf. So Annie, welcome. So pleased to have you here with us.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's dive right in, because enough of my voice. It's your 10th anniversary of becoming a 1% for the Planet member. So congratulations. That's a long time. I have had the great gift of having been there for all of those 10 years, and just been such a delight to work with you every step of the way, and to see the way in which you've become just such an incredible leader in our network. So take all of us back to 2016 when the decision was being made. What were the conversations like at the leadership level, and kind of what made it a yes for all of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I had like a great game plan for people out there, because I feel like this is kind of a question for a lot of sustainability leaders in terms of like, how do you get leadership to the yes? I was very lucky back then. We were a bunch of kids starting a company, and I started at Peak about almost 12 years ago, and I was there for a little while, and we were a team of about 10, 11 people at the time. And remarkably, our CEO agreed to allow me to work on corporate responsibility as pretty much a full-time job. And the first thing I wanted to do was become a 1% for the Planet member. And so I went to great stakes, making a very thorough PowerPoint that I was going to present to the team and to Pete, our CEO. And I presented to the team. I finished. I was ready to go to bat for this and really fight my way to the finish line to get us, to become 1% for the Planet members. And very fortunately, everyone just kind of looked around, and Pete said, "Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Let's do it." And so that was our story. So I had it pretty lucky at the time. I think at the time, though, I didn't realize to what degree it was going to become really a catalyst and foundation for our entire environmental and social impact program, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more in this conversation. But it really was what started everything in a way.
Awesome. That's a great story. And how you've grown since then, which is very exciting. What has been like the most interesting thing you've learned or something that has surprised you since becoming a member 10 years ago?
I think the thing that kind of still sometimes surprises me, and I think everyone on this call probably is not in this position, but I am still surprised that even sometimes employees and definitely people that are not part of 1% assume that a brand gives 1% of their revenue to 1% for the planet, and then 1% for the planet distributes that money. When in fact, as we know, the brands get to decide where that money goes. And not only does the brand get to decide where that money goes, within the vetted nonprofit network, there's a lot of creativity and innovation and thoughtfulness that can go into that giving. And one example of that is Peak Design originated in the film and photography industry. So our network, we're filmmakers and photographers, and we really believe in the power of storytelling and how important, film and photography can be in, educating the public on important environmental issues and, creating calls to action to get people mobilized and getting certain policies over the finish line. And so we would have filmmakers approach us, wanting sponsorships to create really important environmental pieces, but we didn't have, additional funding that we could give them to sponsor these important, films. But fortunately, we figured out that a lot of times they were working with vetted nonprofits on these issues. And so we would work with the filmmaker and the nonprofit to basically donate to the nonprofit the cost it would, take to create this piece, and they would pay the filmmaker. And we've created some really impactful, beautiful pieces kind of through that partnership of filmmaker, nonprofit, and Peak Design. So I think there's a lot of creativity that can get in how you can have the most impact with the giving that you have. So just thinking outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, that's so great to hear both that you encounter that confusion, not that that's great, we encounter that as well, but just how you're able to articulate why it's so valuable to have that direct giving opportunity, because you really can figure out what makes you an N of one across our whole network, as every member is, in terms of figuring out how you want to do your giving, what creativity you want to bring to it. So that's a great story. And sort of building on that, as you've noted, becoming part of 1% for the Planet gives you access to this community of network partners, of brands navigating many similar issues. Can you describe some value that you found being part of the network, part of the community, and any even specific collaborations you've had that have been valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been, I think, a lot of different collaborations I can point to, but I think there is just a really lovely, and I don't know, I'm sure somebody can articulate this far better than I, but there is just an automatic level of trust and respect for other brands that are 1% members. Even if you've never talked to anybody from that company, even if you don't really know anything about that company, I will take a call from anybody who's a 1% member, and anyone will take a call from me if they're a 1% member, because we have that shared value and that shared commitment. And so there's just an automatic level of trust and respect that you have for brands who have decided to commit to something like this. And so I've found it valuable in that sometimes I am navigating sustainability challenges, but I know another brand that has addressed those challenges, and I'm able to pick up the phone and say, hey, 1% network, I have a question about this. Will you take my call and help me out? And it's always a yes. And I think that's really invaluable, especially navigating the constant flux of sustainability, which is always changing, always a challenge, always uncharted territory. And we've also been kind of connected roundabout ways in that, bringing back kind of the filmmaker organization stuff. We've worked with filmmakers and organizations who've put together these beautiful pieces that are really important and impactful. But Peak Design, relative to some of the big dogs in the network, we don't have the same kind of distribution or audience that some of the bigger brands do. But we've actually, had other 1% brands, specifically Patagonia, pick up multiple projects that we've instigated and started and built out, and we've put them out on our sites, but then they've picked them up and been able to distribute them to a much greater audience. And so, it's been a really great collaborative and connecting force.
Yeah, and that's so great. It's really such an important thing to talk about, because one thing that's important to like remember, like for everyone on this call and for us as well, is we don't certify that part of what you're doing. Like we often don't know until after the fact that you've had some great problem solving conversation with another brand. And that's a really valuable part of the opportunity. So the 1% for the Planet commitment and certification is kind of this foundation on which so many other great things like those brand collaborations and just like trusted peer problem solving partners can be created. So love to hear those stories. Shifting over to your giving and your environmental partners, you have been like incredibly, creative. You've had just an interesting mix, always evolving, of monetary, in kind, volunteering, advertising, donations. We've hosted our 2025 Sessions event at your San Francisco headquarters. How has your approach to giving evolved over the years, and what's different today than it was 10 years ago?
Yeah. When we first got started, it was really, we were just like, that organization looks good. Let's write a check and send it to them. And we've really become much more thoughtful and sophisticated in how we give and how to maximize the impact of that giving. And I think that takes different shapes and, in terms of the type of giving that we give, but also really, when I mentioned earlier that 1% really was a catalyst and foundation to our environmental and social program, I think in an ideal world, every brand would have a separate budget for all of their environmental initiatives. They would have their climate and decarbonization budget. They'd have their advocacy budget. They'd have their, supply chain workers' rights budget. They'd have their pure philanthropy, like 1% budget. Unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in. We need to keep the lights on and we need to pay our employees. And what 1% gave to me was a master budget. And if I could fit some stuff into that budget, I didn't need to get sign off from leadership, basically. It was so much easier to get a yes, because it was like, oh, is this going to cost anything? I'm like, oh, it's coming out of 1%. And they're like, great, go forth and do it. But it's such a win-win-win in the sense that I was able to then weave in our climate label work and our decarbonization work, and weave in our fair trade and our fair trade program and our B Corp fee and our advocacy program, and all put it under the 1% bucket, so that it fits in that Venn diagram of like helping us build our program as an individual company, but also help an organization like the Conservation Alliance and advocacy, and also support this larger environmental movement around whatever they were working on. So I've just tried, we've been trying to be more strategic and smart about how we really leverage and how we really can find multiple wins through our giving, and that's really helped guide how and what we choose to fund.
Mm-hmm. And maybe digging a little deeper, so going off script here a little bit, can you give us like a story of like a giving partnership of whatever size, like at whatever period in the 10 years that you either feel particularly proud of or that was particularly instructive for you and your team?
I mean, I think I'm going to talk about them a little bit later, but we've been the one organization we've been with for all 10 years is the Conservation Alliance. And I think the Alliance has been we've seen a really interesting growth in that organization over the 10 years that we've been together, in that when we first joined, they were primarily a re-granting organization. You would give money to them, they would find really important grassroots nonprofits to fund, and then we would fund those. And then they realized, to have a greater impact, we need to also bring in the advocacy component, so that we give to these grassroots organizations, but we also advocate for the work that they're doing at a federal and state level, primarily federal level. And so we got to kind of be on this journey with them as they became a more impactful organization. And they taught us everything we know about advocacy. I had no idea what advocacy was or how an organization could get involved with advocacy. So that was a huge growth development for us partnering with them, was understanding what it is and how we could get involved with it. So yeah, that's been a very long-standing partner for us.
Awesome. And I know that you have been very involved, so I imagine they would say the same thing in terms of their value of all that you have brought to them. So it's
win-win
to see that kind of partnership develop. So I love that. And let's keep going on that, because I know that there is a really strong moment right now of relationship with the Conservation Alliance, particularly around the Brands for Public Lands initiative, which is more important than ever in this moment. So if you want to just share a little bit about your involvement with that, and kind of what's going on and why it matters so much at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, public lands is very near and dear to my heart, and I think Peak Design's heart. I think obviously Peak Design is based in the outdoor industry, and so I think people can see obviously the direct correlation between the health of our public lands and the health of the industry. We make products that are used in these places. If these places didn't exist, that would hurt our business. But I think, in the back of your head, you're like, is that really going to happen? There's a lot of public land. If a little bit goes away, is that really going to impact the industry or the businesses? And yes, it will, in the sense that it's a tremendously slippery slope. And the precedent it sets is very dangerous for, the long term. And so, once a piece of land is developed or sold, we're not getting it back. And so we really need to be careful. And right now we need as much wild habitat and open spaces as we can globally, not just even in North America. But it's not just the outdoor industry, it's the entire nation, obviously. Our public lands provide clean water, clean air, climate mitigation in the form of carbon sinks, public health, tremendous, there's very clear evidence around the impact of public lands on physical and mental well-being. And it's something that, the nation is really struggling in terms of our public health. And then lastly, economics, it's a huge, our public lands are a huge economic force. It's the outdoor recreation industry is a $1.3 trillion industry. It's bigger than pharma. It's bigger than oil and gas. And what's so cool about this economy is that it's sustainable. In theory, this economy can provide revenue for surrounding communities, and not just outdoor, it's the grocery stores, it's the hotels, it's the mom and pop shops. This economy can provide income for those communities forever if we take care of the source of that economy, which are our public lands. And for better or worse, businesses have tremendous influence over policy decisions, as we've seen, mostly for bad, but also for good. And so it really behooves the business community to get involved and to get loud and proud about their support of public lands. And what's also so cool about public lands is that the super majority of the population is in favor of protecting our lands and properly managing our lands. Left, right, old, young, man, woman, whoever. So, it's not really even sticking your neck out there. Brands on either side of the aisle can get involved with protecting these lands, and customers love it. They love seeing that. It's like the one issue area that really brings people together. The last thing I'll say, sorry, clearly I really like this topic. But the last thing I'll say about that is I can understand if you're a brand and not knowing how to get involved in this space. It can be a little overwhelming if you don't know what advocacy is. Like, I didn't know what it was. But that's where, like a coalition like Brands for Public Lands, the Conservation Alliance, other conservation advocacy groups on the call, and in the network, they will guide you in that. They're the experts. We really think of the Conservation Alliance as our, government affairs team, and they tell you what issues you need to prioritize, how to get involved, the script you can use for your social media, what letters you can sign on to, which representatives you should call and talk to. So it just makes it really easy for you. And so I really encourage everybody to get involved. Even if everybody got a little bit involved and made one call or signed one letter, it would move the dial. So I'll stop yapping about that. Thank you for asking.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for your passion. And maybe I'll just tease out a few points that I heard that I think are, extend even beyond the US. So one is that idea that you didn't know anything about advocacy when you first made the partnership with the Conservation Alliance. And this is so true across many of our members. And sometimes it's a mistaken stumbling block because people think they do need to know everything before they step into 1% for the planet or before they build partnerships. And I think sort of having the realization that building the partnership can be a pathway to learning and growth and further engagement, that you don't have to have it all figured out. You can have your strategy, you can have your passion, you can have your values, and then you can learn more. So I think that's a really great example across many different types of partnerships. I think also you mentioned, they're your kind of government affairs team. And I think that's a really important thing to call out, is both the 1% for the Planet team, our staff working with our members, and then also the partners across our environmental partner network. All of us can serve as this added capacity for business members in different ways. And I think that's another stumbling block that we often want to remove, is like helping businesses to see how we can really make it an easier, smoother path with lots of support to make these important impact commitments. And then last thing I'll say is just, this current public lands issue that Annie was just talking about is a US issue, but I think extrapolating beyond that, the rewilding efforts in places that don't have as much current public land, land protection in other countries, 1% for the Planet is, working and playing and partnering in a lot of those different areas. And there's so many great sort of themes, and certainly the passion that, Annie has shared, we've seen that across our membership. And so I do think, really just expanding this to an issue that extends beyond any country's boundaries, like figuring out what are the different strategies on the ground to make sure that we're creating space for nature, creating space for, human connection with wild places and all the many benefits that Annie mentioned. So that's something that we really see across our network and, invite people to consider. So thank you, Annie, for.
And I'll say that, I think you brought up a good point too. I feel like we've been very North American centric currently at Peak Design. And I think that's it is what it is. I think, I currently had one of our European-based employees reach out and say, hey, why aren't we doing anything over here? And I said, you know what? That's an excellent point. Please go do some research and figure out what we should be doing over there. And he did. And so we're looking at some projects now to expand our conservation efforts to internationally, which we really hadn't done before. And so I appreciate the employee engagement. And I'm glad you brought up kind of the global lens, because a lot of times I get hyper-focused in our backyard when in fact, this work is important globally.
Yeah. And well, now you've given me two more points to call out. One is, like 10 years in and still so much learning, like, oh, hey, yeah, now we need to sort of look globally. And we just love that, because I do think every single year for every single 1% for the Planet member, there can be these great through lines of strategy, but then these awesome opportunities just to keep learning and evolving. And then also I would say, I think what we see, and I don't have the percentage, but the large majority of our members do give very locally. And what we always stand behind, and what you as members continue to kind of embody for us, is the power of passion to be that sort of fuel for continuing commitments. Because, when you care deeply, you're going to find the ways to, give smart, to do it in ways that are consistent, to, build 10-year relationships so that you can do so much more than when you started. And so maybe that does have, a narrow geographic scope, but that's okay, because you're investing deeply in that space. We knew we'd have some dog visits.
Yes, dog's entering now.
What we see is, we're sort of surrounding the globe through our membership globally, and that like deep passion about even smaller than North America, like very local places, is often a really great strategy. So, we really appreciate that. Let's expand to some of the other partners that I know you have. So Peak Design is a really great example of a brand that understands kind of the compounding value of multiple certifications. So B Corp, the climate label, fair trade, 1% for the Planet, all in the mix. Like, how do you think about that package? And what's the kind of bigger picture that you are telling consumers and your employees and your strategy?
Yeah, I know they really have added up. It seems like a little ridiculous, but they all fit a different part of our company. You know, and they address a unique, different area of sustainability and running a responsible company. And you know, I mean, I think when we think about certifications and badges, and you don't you shouldn't just get the badge for the badge's sake. You know, like, we don't need more badges, or you can do the good work without the badge. But these certifications do provide for us, especially small sustainability teams of one, the ability to do a lot of good work without reinventing the wheel, because they've done all the hard work in distilling the best practices and building a framework. And you can just take that and apply it so that you can address that area of business using the best expertise out there. And so, you know, I think certifications for us have played, they've kind of served three roles. They've served that framework role where I don't have to figure out, how do we take care of our factory workers, or how do we think about, you know, carbon accounting and creating an internal carbon fee. We figure out, you know, fair trade will help us with that, or the climate label will help us with that, and we take those frameworks. Secondly, obviously, is accountability. While you don't need the badge, it's nice to have a third party looking over your shoulder, making sure you're doing what you're saying you're doing, and putting that stamp of approval on there, and working as a partnership to help you, you know, troubleshoot when you're getting stuck on some of those issues. But lastly, and I think most importantly, is even if you don't, you know, I think for a long time, Peak Design didn't actually care about advertising our good. You know, we just knew we wanted to do good. We didn't care about marketing it and having other people know about it. I think that's still really important. That helps get leaders, you know, engaged and involved in this stuff, but it wasn't a driving factor of ours. But we wanted to advertise less for our sake and more because we wanted to grow that movement and that initiative that they were trying to build, like what B Corp was trying to build, or 1% was trying to build, or change climate. And so, you know, I think that's another way that certification helps, you know, not only helps your own company, but helps build the movement and create brand awareness for what those organizations are trying to do. So, you know, those are kind of the reasons why we've pursued the certifications that we've pursued.
Nice. And do you have some stories or, you know, data points from your work with your consumers or your employees or like other stakeholders that have sort of indicated how those play into, you know, their connection to your brand?
You know, I wish I had like quantitative data on that or survey, but I don't. It's all qualitative, and we get quite a bit of qualitative data, whether it's from the customers coming into our retail stores telling us how much we appreciate it, whether it's comments on our social media, whether it's honestly, I think every employee interview that we've had in the last however many years, the main reason or one of the top reasons that someone wants to come work for Peak Design is our environmental and our social impact work. So while we don't have, you know, the hard facts, we have definitely gotten plenty of qualitative data.
Yeah, well, qualitative data counts too.
Yes.
And we've heard that from other businesses as well, that in different ways, it's a really strong employee engagement strategy, which I think has like elevated, at least in terms of what we've been hearing. And likewise, we don't have this, you know, a statistical data set to prove this, but we have heard more and more in this like post-COVID, more remote moment in the world, that the value of these kinds of commitments has only strengthened for companies in terms of employee engagement. So that's great to hear for you. Let's kind of like center on 2026, and then we'll start looking ahead a little bit. Excuse me. So just like a 2026 pulse check. I mean, 2025 and 2026, like what interesting years to live in this world. And, you know, given everything that purpose-driven businesses, of which Peak Design is among them and certainly a leader, everything that you're navigating right now, what's your advice to other leaders trying to either step into or hold the line on values commitments, like, you know, environmental commitments?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could probably parse that question out depending on level of leadership, you know, and people, you know, in my position versus brands who have like fully committed this, but are navigating a sea of other people who are not, you know, I mean, I think thinking of the company brand level of why or why not we kind of stay the course is, you know, I mean, the pendulum's going to swing. At least one can hope the pendulum's going to. Historically, we've seen lots of pendulum swings through the course of history. So I assume at some point the pendulum's going to swing back, hopefully in the not too distant future. And I'd rather be a brand that has stood the test of time and has not been a fair weather sustainability brand. I want to be able to show that we have stuck to our guns, we've stuck to our values in the good weather and the bad weather. And I think there's both kind of a business case for that. I also just think there's an ethics case to it. And I know that seems wishy-washy and it's hard to sell to a CEO. But like, what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of brand do you want to be? I just, I think we as humans, have a moral compass and we abide by that moral compass, but somehow it breaks down the tragedy of commons, or when you get to a brand level and you're like, hey, I'm just going to like throw those values away. And that, like, don't do that. Like, demonstrate that, you are bringing your ethics and your values to your company level. That said, I know it's easier said than done, especially at people at my level that aren't the CEOs and aren't calling, the primary shots. And so, for me, in terms of getting to be a more tactical at the level that I'm at, we need to try to do everything we can to hold on to the gains that we have made through this storm and hope that we can make it out with as much intact as possible. And I've been really approaching that in a way of trying to understand a nuanced understanding of how these initiatives fit into a larger business case, whether that's regulatory, whether that's compliance, whether that's liability, and making those arguments to leadership so they're not on the chopping block. And I know that it's for example, we are a B Corp. And we we're in the process of recertifying right now with some very aggressive standards. And B Corp is really important because it's like kind of a business reporting, protocol. And we want to make our B Corp. We don't want to lose that. And for example, in the new B Corp, you have to have an advocacy component. You have to have a climate component. You have to. So I can now say, hey, for reporting requirements and regular, these kind of, we have to have this, it's not a choice. And it makes it more of an easy sell to leadership when it's like, this is just part of how we have to do business, So I think we're dabbling in that right now till the pendulum swings, and then hopefully we can get, full speed ahead in the progress we want to make. But it's really heartening to hear that, as you were saying, the level of giving was as high as it was, that's fantastic. That I think speaks volumes to, where a lot of brands are at.
Yeah, I think you're in great company of other 1% for the planet businesses who, despite the headwinds and just uncertainty of this moment, are sticking with it. I think where we've seen a slowdown is, new businesses figuring out how to step into the commitment. We fortunately have seen some great ones joining, and, we continue to move in that direction. But I'd love to, just double down on that a little bit. If you were to sort of sit down for a cup of tea in San Francisco with someone who's, in your equivalent role at an organization who is saying, Annie, Peak Design has sort of got it dialed in. You figured out these commitments. I want to bring this to my company because my moral compass is, set on that same course. Mm-hmm. Help me out. Like, how do I get my leadership to get over the line? Like, I know you had the experience of them saying, yeah, sounds like a great idea. So you didn't have to make the hard sell, but a lot, you've been through a lot. So how would you advise this friend of yours?
I think it really depends on the size of the company, on where they are in their journey, on the, proclivity, or I don't know if that's the right word, of leadership to actually jump into something like this. So I think it would have to be really case by case. That said, I think it also depends on, if you think you can get a 1% commitment out of them, do that, because as Peak has demonstrated, you can build all the program stuff under that 1% commitment. If that's too much of an ask, then it's really about figuring out that one program component that you think they might want to do and doubling down on that. And I think I would probably take the compliance or liability tact. I think there's good arguments now that can be made to leadership around why, you know, not taking care of your factory workers is a real business liability, or why not, you know, doing better carbon accounting and decarbonization is going to challenge your ability to sell to certain retailers and distributors, and you don't want that to be a hurdle to growth in the market. So I think, you know, it kind of depends case by case, and so it kind of depends a little bit, but those would be a few of the things I would suggest.
Yeah, such great points. And I think really pulling out what you said about, you know, the 1% for the planet commitment, creating an ecosystem within which a lot of other things become possible or easier or less expensive. I think that's a really important point. And we have worked closely with our partners at B Lab, Change Climate Project, to really make sure that our programs are talking to each other, so they're not these separate silos.
Yeah.
But the 1% for the planet commitment creates a framework within which those others can live. Not to say that we consume them all, but more that they all work together really well. And we have great partnerships across them, and we've figured out the ways that they can speak to each other. So I really appreciate that you brought out that point so clearly from the business standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing I would recommend is get 1%, like get 1%, because that takes so much friction away. That took all the friction away for me. Like I was able to be like, and now we're doing, you know, fair trade, and now we're doing B Lab, and now we're doing, and it didn't matter because all of it could fit under this umbrella of giving, and we still have a bucket of pure philanthropic, write the check and don't expect anything from it as well. But we can also do all of this other incredible programmatic work without any of the friction of begging for resources from leadership. So if an organization is able to get into 1% ecosystem, like push for that, because then you can build an entire program underneath that.
Yeah, awesome. And we really appreciate that, because that can be the kind of concept that can be hard to, you know, get across initially, but just to really like put a fine point on that, you know, across the different certifications that you're part of, B Lab dues for the B Corp certification count towards your 1%. Your 1% commitments can include that advocacy component and the other ways in which you are also able to then meet requirements of B Lab. So there's some like interconnections there. Fair trade premiums count towards your 1% certification. And the climate label, the different costs that you allocate there count towards your 1%. So they all sort of are fitting together and enabling you to build a unique strategy for you across these like third-party verified certifications. So it's beautiful.
Can I give one more example that just came up this year? So we make very obviously high premium bags, really fancy bags, and we totally miscalculated how many bags to make for a series of bags. So we have these like really fancy bags, too many of them in the warehouse. And we were just gonna like try to wait and sell them through eventually, and it was fine or whatever. But right now they're just collecting dust in a warehouse, and it's very sad. And one of our 1% members is running this massive event, and they need a bunch of bags. And they asked us, they're like, we need 200 bags. And we said, we have 200 bags. And it was a win-win, because this organization really needed, you know, some bags, and we sent them the bags, and they, you know, so we get to put them to use. We get to get them out of our warehouse. We get to donate them, and then the organization gets to use those bags. So again, there's so many creative ways to use 1% and make it doable, you know, through all of these different ways. So yeah. Join 1% out there. If you're not out there and awesome. You're not in 1%.
Nice. And that sounds like one lucky partner to receive those lovely iron bags.
Two organizations reach out about it. And so it's been such a win-win for everybody.
That's great. And you have always done that in-kind piece so well to, you know, do it in such a way that it, you know, meets a need that you have, but most importantly, like it meets a need that the nonprofit partners have. So
exactly.
Really great. Building on the sort of sustainability initiative, so at Peak Design, it's, you know, it's very holistic, and it goes beyond philanthropy, which we've been talking about a little bit in this last question, you know, from offsetting your entire carbon footprint. I remember actually the first time I came to your offices, and it was basically just you and Pete and like a few other people, and we were trying to figure out how to map your carbon footprint. So that was fun. Or you have the Peak Design Marketplace for consumers to resell products. like expanding beyond just these certifications, like how do you think about and approach your company's impact holistically?
Yeah, the holistic nature is almost a byproduct of thinking about impact in highest ROI terms, I think, in the sense that, when I think about what can we do as an organization to mitigate our environmental and social damage, I'm looking for what is the in whatever facet, in whatever area of business, what's our greatest return on investment in terms of impact? Where can we have the biggest bang for the buck? And almost naturally, that ends up being kind of like you go for the low-hanging fruits across a broad swath of things about what materials can you use, who can you donate to, what kind of advocacy can you do, what kind of climate mitigation work can you do. And you kind of swoop up all that low-hanging fruit with that has the really high ROI. And then you kind of continue going through that, prioritizing, all right, now what initiative can I do that has the maximum impact, that, given my resources, given my, sphere of influence, and my abilities. And it almost naturally for us has led to a very holistic corporate responsibility program. I think there are some companies who very strategically go deep in an area, and I think that's just as great. It's just a different approach. And, those companies end up kind of moving the playing field or like pushing progress further because they go deep in a subject. So I'm really grateful for those companies because they can push various sustainability initiatives further than a generalist and a holistic maybe company. But for us, it's always been about with our resources and our sphere of influence, where can we have the greatest impact? And the byproduct has been a very holistic program, I think.
That's great. One of the things that you've certainly done on this call, but we've known, Peak Design has really stood out in this way in the past as well, is encouraging other businesses to join 1% for the Planet. And, we love to see this because sometimes some companies can struggle a little bit of like, well, wait, aren't we kind of giving away our edge to
secret sauce? Yeah.
And I think you've, always like been just the opposite and really, been very active in encouraging other businesses to join the movement. Can you explain like why that is and what you see as the value of that movement building?
I want it to be like a black hole, or like I want to grow more to suck more people in. I want to create that I don't know, that mass. There's probably some Newtonian or Einsteinian theory of mass or whatever. We've never seen it as competition. I want it to become the thing that everyone just does because everyone does it, sort of thing. So I'm just working on like feeding the black hole, or feeding so that's probably a wrong thing, feeding the mass to grow it. Because again, I think it just stems from ethics and value and what's the right thing to do as a business. And in one sense, it's creating competition because then you're another brand that has 1% logo. In another way, it's decreasing competition in that it equals the playing field of like where those resources are going, and the fact that you're looking at planet, people, and profit as opposed to just profit. And so, I think it kind of depends on how you frame it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I think, let's just point out that over the last 10 years, Peak Design has grown immensely. And, there are many reasons for that, including your amazingly good products, and your impact commitments are, not nothing and not an insignificant part of that growth. So I think you're, a really great exemplar of like building that movement is part of also building your own growth. And thank you. You also just helped us come up with the tagline for our 25th anniversary: 1% for the planet, the black hole.
Be the black hole. I don't know why that came to my mind. There's a lot better examples.
Maybe we'll go with something more along the lines of like magnetism or something like that.
Yes,
but the black hole. Yes. So thank you for that. We have been talking about what our theme will be, and you've consulted us. Okay, last question, looking ahead, and certainly if there's anything else that you want to share beyond this, we have a little more time, but last question for me is looking ahead. So as you look at your next 10 years, what are you thinking about? What are you focused on? What are you excited about?
I think Peak Design, we are solid. I think we classify solidly as middle size right now, but I think we're looking at some solid growth over the next 5 to 10 years. And I mean, I think I could take this question a million different ways, but really what success will look like for me is if we can demonstrate, as you said, being a very profitable, very successful company while not giving up our values and our environmental and social impact work. Because I want to demonstrate that there's more companies out there that can do it and can do it very successfully. And there's no excuse not to do it because, hey, look at these companies, they're doing it and they're doing it really well. So, I think it's going to take a lot of different shapes, forms, but ultimately for me, that's what success looks like. And that's kind of where I want to direct the company over the next 5 to 10 years.
Oh, that's so great. And we are right here as your partners to help make that so. And, I mentioned earlier that so much of what we have become has been sparked by great ideas from members like you. So we really do just look forward to continuing to be on the journey with you. So Annie, thank you. And thanks to Peak Design for 10 years of commitment, and can't wait to just continue working together and just to seeing all of the ways that you will definitely meet those great goals in the next
Thanks, Kate.
years. Yeah. We're so excited about that. And thanks to this great audience for being here. I saw the chats out of the corner of my eye. So it definitely seems like some good questions and good energy. And we really, really appreciate that. And, I think one of many things stood out to me from what Annie said, but I think really just what is standing out most is that courage to commit. And remembering back to 10 years ago, so much of what you now can speak to with so much authority, Annie, you didn't know that 10 years ago. And, so you really are embodying one of the phrases that we inherited from Patagonia, which is commit and then figure it out. And that commitment is not blind or, not thoughtful. It's like making a thoughtful commitment, but then recognizing that you're starting a learning journey. And I think, again, Peak Design really embodies that. And I think in this moment in the world, we have seen some hesitancy and paralysis in the context of uncertainty. And the question that Annie, you make me really want to just get in front of all of us and, have all of us share with people who, when we're having tea with those friends who are saying, how do I get this across the line? What are you waiting for? Really getting people to wrestle with that question, because if now's not the time when you want to really step into your values, I don't know when is. And so we really want to be there to sort of partner with you to help you figure out how can you step into those commitments that can then become a moral compass, a business compass, a financial compass, an employee engagement compass, so many things that it can really help pull together with for you. So thank you so much, Annie. Thanks to all of you on the call. We really look forward to the next one already. It's so great to have these opportunities to connect, and please keep in touch.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate.